Hello, welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. It's always a pleasure to be here with you to discuss things in the Word, and I'm excited that we have a returning guest. We have Gary Wayne back with us. As you recall, Gary was with us a few weeks ago, and he shared on his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and we talked about the Nephilim and kind of a lot of the things that were happening, what is their basic agenda. But he goes more than just what happened back in Genesis chapter 6. He pulls together a lot of different facets. And so today we're going to look at what is that conspiracy? What is that bigger thing? It's going to involve the Illuminati and then some. And so without any further ado, Gary, we're so glad to have you back with us.
Well, so happy to be back here tonight again to continue our conversation, and hoping that as we link a few more things into the whole sort of story, that again we're going to raise some curiosity and hopefully some interest with the audience, and hopefully they'll dig a little deeper into this. So I think we're talking about the Illuminati and secret societies tonight and how that sort of links in. So yeah, pretty excited about talking about that tonight.
Yeah, it really is. And this is something that you've clearly done more research than I have, but I've done some as well. And, the secret societies, Illuminati, whatever term we want to use, I know they're different, but they're all very similar. But, I think something that we should all just keep in mind is that, yes, Satan has an agenda. He has a conspiracy. He is trying to take over the world. All right, we get that. But we know that the one that we serve, the God of the universe, the father of Yeshua, he is the one who sits on the throne, and he's not budged. He's not moved. None of these things should cause us any alarm or any fear. They'll cause fear to people that don't know their maker. But if you know your maker, if you know the one who is in control, who has the keys of Hades and death, then you will say, okay, that's interesting. It's good to know some of these things. And we can just be confident. A couple of years ago, I was sharing with some friends of mine all these amazing things that I was learning about the secret societies, Illuminati, etc. And they were kind of spellbound. And then they asked me this question: well, what do we do with that? And it was challenging for me because I didn't know what to do at that point. And so I didn't know what to tell them. What do you do with this? So it is very interesting information. Um, it should be something that we should at least have a basic idea of what's going on, and Gary's going to give us more than a basic idea. But at the end of the day, what we ought to do is pray that God's kingdom will come. You can't fight darkness. The only thing you can do is turn on the light. And so the way that we fight it is not try to go against the darkness, but we turn on the light, and that's how we defeat the darkness. So Gary, kind of give us the background here. I mean, we started with Genesis 6. I mean, we kind of started before that as well, but Genesis 6 is kind of that fulcrum point of where Satan had this general plan. He and his demons, or his demons, or fallen angels, whatever your perspective is on that, came into the world. They created this hybrid race known as Nephilim. But you've really gone into more detail. You've gone into the ancient sources to then bring us up to the current day to help us understand that there's a conspiracy that bridges all of human history. What is that conspiracy? What are they trying to do, and who are they?
Well, let's just talk about what they're trying to do first. I mean, I think we need to understand that what they're trying to do is what the Bible prophesies is going to happen. And so they're always endeavoring to do that. So what they're trying to do is bring about the end time. And that comes with world government, universal religion, Antichrist, and the rebellion against God. That's what they're trying to do. And they want to do that, which is very odd. But they are told that they can win. Certainly the angels and the demons know the power of God, and the angels for sure. I mean, Lucifer and the angels were around God, around the throne. They know who their creator is, so they know they can't win. And they were fighting for their own realm as well, not that they thought they could win. And so that's kind of what they're deceiving humans with. And how they're deceiving humans is they say you can win because Lucifer or Hell or Satan is the equal of God, and that's that dualist religion. So part of the second question is this has got to do with that universal polytheist religion that's coming in the end time, that's been with us since the time of Genesis 6 and before, with the descendants of Cain. And secondly, they utilize humankind to say things and do things they would never do. You never hear of in the Bible, for example, that I'm aware of, that you have Satan or any other angel slandering God. But you certainly hear of it from humans. And particularly Antichrist will slander God and say unheard of things against God as a spiritual beast, right? So they're using humans as puppets and deceiving them, and they know that they're already, their game plan is already lost, and they aren't going to receive grace, because I think they were told that by Jesus. At least the ones that were in the abyss were told that while Jesus was still in the grave at the resurrection. And so all they're trying to do now is deceive as many as possible and lead as many other people to destruction as possible as well. And so, yeah.
So just let me stop you right there really quick, because I mean, this is really interesting. So you think that they basically think that they're done for, that they cannot win. These are the by the way, do you think fallen angels and demons are one and the same, or do you keep them separate?
Separate.
Okay. My personal take is that they're the same, but we can debate that another day.
That's a nuance. The way I separate it, the way I separate it is the demons are the spirits of the original immortal Nephilim is all.
Okay.
And the fallen angels were their procreators. So, but that's for a whole different show. But at the end of the day, they're on the same team, right?
Yeah, right. I may use the term I use the term interchangeably, just so that you know my terminology. I'm of the persuasion that they're same, but that's okay. So let's call them fallen angels. Okay. So do you think these fallen angels think that they're basically toast, and the only joy that they're going to get is by to drag somebody else with them to the lake of fire? That's the only
that's the only
good feeling they're going to get.
That's the only thing that they have left. And I think the original deceptions that they were bringing on humankind in the beginning is that and I don't think they anticipated the resurrection, because I think what they were trying to do was show, and God was permitting it, of course, that humankind was going to rebel as they did, and that would somehow justify their rebellion, or he would destroy humankind into absolute obliteration and nothingness for being so sinful. But of course, God is greater than free choice, and I don't think the angels saw the resurrection coming. So
interesting. Well, I'm just going to take a little different view on that, just to let people know. In my book, The Millennium Chronicles, I portray it just a little bit differently. And again, some of this is just speculation, so it's kind of how I'm connecting the dots. The way that I see it is that I think Satan was, so intelligent from the beginning. He was smart enough to know that he could not arm wrestle God, right? That if you just go toe to toe with God, God's going to win. But he thought that he could get mankind to basically, take the gun and shoot himself, so to speak. And, he could remain essentially guiltless in a sense, because when God came walking in the garden saying, "Hey, what happened here?" Satan's like, "Well, I didn't do anything. It was Adam and Eve. They're the ones who broke your law. I just kind of, and we talked a little bit. They listened to me, but other than that, and I think that actually was slander. I think that when it was a very, 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 very subtle form of slander, by the way, but it was still slander to call into question God's character. And that certainly Satan didn't foresee the cross. I completely agree with that. But I think after after the cross, I think he changed his tactic to try to get us to destroy ourselves once again by breaking God's law, so that we would bring a curse upon ourselves. So, and then I think, of course, at the very end of all things, when Satan is going to be released from the abyss, that he's going to have one more plan that he thinks that he might actually win. So anyway, that's how I connect the dots. But who's right or wrong, I guess we'll have to wait and see. So
yeah, and even though there's some subtle differences in there, they're not significant differences. So we're trending in the same direction. And if Satan does have something in his hip pocket, I don't know how that would help him, because God is omnipotent and he knows everything from the beginning to the end. So he may have something up his sleeve, so to speak, but God already knows what's up that sleeve. So it'll be interesting if we're around to see how that sort of plays out. And in terms of, does it happen in our lifetime type of thing. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so that's kind of how things are coming at it in terms of these secret societies and the religion that's in there. So you have three groups that have been working together since prehistory. You have this polytheist religion, which are the religious aspect, known today as Gnosticism, Theosophy, New Age, because they're all they lead out of each other, and a cosmology of the pantheon, which is of the religions around the world, whether it's Zoroastrianism or Hermeticism or Sabianism. They've combined all of it to create this sort of universal identity of religions from around the world. And you have the secret societies that grew up and as an extension out of these religions through the mystery schools as they come down through history that have been with us ever since. And as Freemasons recant in their legends, that Nimrod was the first Grand Master of Freemasonry after the flood, who wrote the first Constitution. So we have that connection going forward. And you have the royal bloodlines working together with the very powerful and ennobled elite, whom they believe that they have bloodlines that go back to the Nephilim and fallen angels. So these are the groups that are coming forward, and these organizations will hold together through time. And if you look at sort of the organizational structure of some of the kingships in pretty much everywhere around the world, except for in the nation state of Israel. So Israel is kind of this island of monotheism in a world of, or sea of polytheism. And so the organizational structure in the other countries that Israel always wanted to emulate to a certain degree, just as sort of envy at times in their falling away, would be they would have a king that would take their genealogy back to the Nephilim fallen angels. And then you would have the mystery religion, right, that would be operated by the priests or magi or wizards or whatever name you want to give them, but they were the religious class. And then you have the development of the knowledge, which is what the secret societies were really designed to do. And that was done through mystery schools like the Pythagorean mystery school, which most people would be the most familiar with, that would come down through history. So that's the organizational structure that comes forward. And as this crosses through the time of Jesus and then beyond, you have a group that's being formed in about 1090 and formalized in 1099 called the Knights Templar. And that's a sort of a whole story in itself. But after the fall of the Knights Templar, there's a bunch of sort of splits or fissures that happens, and there's a whole bunch of other groups that forms up, because the Knights Templar were formed as a major secret society hidden in Roman Catholicism that did so many different things. They were the modern bankers, as an example. They invented things like the check and transferring of money and storing of money for safety and how to do loans, and they were cheaper than the money traders. And they also, were a military arm, and so many things they were doing when that came apart had to be replaced. And so in 1188, which is a date not when they broke up, you see the first sort of fissure that's going on. And there's the underneath organization that I'm not going to talk about tonight, but it's called the Priory of Sion, splits away at the cutting of the elm. And so they now form out of there the start of the Rosicrucian order. And it's important to understand when they start, because this is the same group that is also going to put kings back on the throne in Europe who have fallen off, that they call this Ordo Draconis or the Sarkani Rand. And so they have kings in there like Vlad the Impaler, as an example, who's Dracula is based on, who's initiated into this. And their other role is to pursue the knowledge of thought, the god Thoth out of Egypt, or the pursuits of thought, as they would call it. or I know other people might pronounce that a little bit differently, but just as it's written. And so it's this Rosicrucian order that sort of splits away first, and they start doing some legwork. And then after the fall of the Templars in 1307, you have some Templars escaping into either the Teutonic Knights or the Knights of St. John, which were sort of parallel orders, although the Teutonic Order is not part of the Roman Catholic Church at that time, or almost any time. They were an autonomous sort of organization, but St. John Order and the Templar orders were definitely Roman Catholic orders. And so some refugees also stow off to Scotland with the knowledge and the treasure and the money. And they get protection under Robert the Bruce, who is King of Scotland at that time. And he's also been excommunicated and is not sort of under the oversight of Rome at that time, because he murdered his rival in a Catholic church, and that did not go over well at the time. And so under the protection of Bruce, and then under the guidance and leadership of the Sinclair family, which is the St. Clairs out of Europe and one of the original founding Knights Templar family, they're going to start Freemasonry with these refugee knights, and they're going to change the name. And so Freemasonry is set up to, as their goal, it is to work the military and the government and the political aspect, and then later the media was added on. And then you also have the Illuminati being set up in around the 1500s, originally in Italy, and then it goes underground because of Roman persecution, and they're called the Enlightened Ones. And then they come back up in Germany in about 1770s, and they merge with Freemasonry, depending on which historian you're talking about, somewhere between 1770 and 1781 to 82. There's a few different varying dates on that. And they become sort of the inner circle of Freemasonry. So as you progress through Freemasonry up the ziggurat of enlightenment, you become enlightened. And at the adept level, or third degree of the York Rite, or 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite, you become illuminated. And now you're part of the adept Illuminati sort of organization. So Illuminati is just a little bit higher than the Freemasons. Not as high as the Rosicrucians, but higher than most Freemasons. And so you also have being set up, just to list some of the other groups off so people understand where this all fits, you have the Jesuits also being set up to replace what the Templars were doing inside the Roman Church, with Ignatius of Loyola in the 1500s, who also studies and pursues the 7 sacred sciences. And he was also a noble, as all of these people were nobles at that time. And what they do in their particular view of religion is they interpret the Bible through the lens of the philosophy of the 7 sacred sciences, right at the beginning. And what their job is to do is to take over the church from the inside, the Roman Church. And then you also have the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians coming together in 1640, then 1660, and then formalized in 1662 under charter of the King of England, the Royal Society. The Royal Society is set up to get control of the education away from the Roman Church, and to affect science and develop the 7 sacred sciences, to honor the great architect of the universe, to lead people away from God, and not to give credit to God for being the creator of all things. And so they start to infiltrate all the education systems through the Royal Society and the sciences. And then you have the Rothschilds, who are set up, again, they start up in about the 1700s to replace the banking arm, because they really need that banking arm being replaced. So this is sort of the major groups that are set up to replace the Knights Templar. And where the Illuminati falls is Freemasonry is sort of a cultic school for Gnostics as they learn it, and so they're kind of like this drafting sort of agency, and you have to be invited to go in. And then the Illuminati is obviously adepts and illuminated. And then as you become more, as you show more talent and that your bloodlines show more purity, you're raised into the Rosicrucians. And of course, the Rosicrucians are made up of some, possibly some non-pure bloods, but certainly diluted bloodlines, but about half of them are the pure bloods that report up to the higher level of the family. So the Rosicrucian is kind of the puppet end here, and the connection to, you know, the committee of 300, which reports to and some people call that the Grand Druid Council, or some people call it Council of 33 of the Grand Druid Council, but they report up to there. And again, these are all pure bloods at this level, and then they report up to the 13 families, and then all of these people from that high level Rosicrucian and up are in continual contact with beings or in continual contact with beings from other realms, whether you want to call them demons, fallen angels, aliens, spirit guides, Great Right Brotherhood, the Celestial Brothers. There's so many different names for them through the different organizations. So that is sort of the basic sort of order. And what the Rosicrucians are doing, as well as organizing a lot of these other groups, is they are perpetuating the history and the legacy, and also keeping the universal religion alive and well. And as sort of offshoots of that, to keep it sort of relevant, they created the Theosophical Society in the 1880s, and then the New Age is a springboard off of that with the rise of the alien phenomena. So anyways, that's a pretty big little rant there, but hopefully it'll give you an idea of the major organizations, not nearly all of them, because there's so many.
That's incredible. So we start basically with the Freemasons. They're kind of at the lower level, then the Illuminati, then the Rosicrucians,
yes,
and then a branch coming out would be the New Age, the Theosophical Society. So is that right? So they're kind of a...
Well, no, they would answer up to the Rosicrucians as well.
Okay.
Because the Rosicrucians hold the sort of the secrets to the to that religion, and also the secret knowledge and everything else. They house all of that.
Wow. And do you know what is the secret knowledge that they're trying to... Is it basically Satan? I mean, I've read a little bit of Albert Pike, and it seems that Lucifer is the big secret. I mean...
Well, it's part of it's certainly a big thing, but you get that at the 3rd degree or the 33rd degree, and there's, so if we use the old York Rite, which is the standard sort of level of mysticism, there's 3 main degrees that most people are familiar with. So at that 3rd degree, you learn that Lucifer is God, as they believe, and they learn about how to survive death and be reincarnated. And the secrets of that, and they also start to learn higher mysteries and degrees, so that if you're going to run other lodges in that, you've got to be 4th or 5th degree, and to be Rosicrucian, you're going to be educated even into even higher degrees. How many different degrees there are, I don't know, but it's a continually sort of escalating sort of manner. So there's greater knowledge than that, and they have the knowledge that's with them from the antediluvian epoch, where they know where it is or they know where it's hidden. And they've been collecting knowledge and things all throughout history in great libraries and storage houses, which was part of the whole Templar mystique, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so along with them, I mean, them and the Vatican have, you know, the vast libraries and depth of knowledge of things that, you know, I'm sure would be just, I know I'd love to get my hands on some of this stuff to find out from their perspectives, both perspectives, as to what was going on in prehistory and what else that they actually know. So
we have a question here from Mr. E300. He says, can we trace the bloodlines of the modern day elite back to the Nephilim, and how do they keep from becoming giants?
So yeah, two very, very good questions. So it's not how we trace their genealogies back, although I know from our perspective that's how we ask the question. It's what the royal families do to trace their genealogies back, and the families that aren't on the thrones, that are pulling strings in the background, and they keep their genealogies, whether they're legitimate or not. They believe they're legitimate, at least today they do, and they take them all the way back into the mists of time. So you know, when Paul talks about, you know, beware of those people, and upon false genealogies or devoted to genealogies. I mean that's kind of what he's talking about. This has been around, and that's how they established their nobility. And so the royal families believe that they take their bloodlines back, and they have the genealogies, they say, in-house to do that. And that's why they continue to intermarry to try and keep those bloodlines as pure as possible. And somebody asked me on one show, well, give me an example of how you know that. And I said, well, I mean, if you go back a little bit in time, the best example of understanding this process in modern time would be World War I. So you had like the Romanovs who were on the thrones in Russia. You had the Habsburgs, they're in Austria, and you had the Kaiser in Germany, and you had the Windsor family that were in England, and there's a few other ones around as well. They were all cousins, right? They all intermarried. So it was actually a family world war. And they've done this right through the mists of time. And if you go back into Egyptian history, again, they were intermarrying as well, and very, very closely, where they would marry their daughters from different mothers and a whole bunch of different things. And when they felt that they needed to inject new fresh blood, they would go to, let's say, the Mitanni dynasty or the Hittite dynasty or any of the other Mesopotamian dynasties that they felt were pure to keep their bloodlines free from disease, I guess probably is why they would do it. Or if they wanted to start a new dynasty somewhere else, they would select a very noble pedigree of female and then link that up with a very noble male to start a new dynasty somewhere else. And they did not have to be from the same Egyptian dynasty or the same Mesopotamian dynasty. So they would pair them up to start a new dynasty elsewhere. And so this tradition has been around forever, just as it was in the antediluvian epoch, where they got that tradition from, because that gives them their divine right to rule. That's what they believe, because they come from the gods, right? And
amazing.
So, yeah. And what was the second question on that?
Yeah, the second question here was, how do they keep from becoming giants?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's again, I think over time, I mean, no matter what you do, you have to bring in further and further out or weakened or more diluted bloodlines to be not as disease-ridden. And if you look at the Habsburgs, they were absolutely loaded with genetic diseases, right? If you don't keep enough fresh blood coming in. So I think over time that more and more human blood has mixed in. They've kept it as pure as they possibly could, but they're not pure, right? And even when the descendants of the giants intermarried after the flood, I mean, there's a dilution going on. So it's a matter of degree in terms of how pure you can keep that. And I think over time, they've lost a lot of that pedigree, and the human qualities have overtaken. So they're our size. They look like us. They've lost their looks. But go back again to the Armana dynasty. And if you get a chance, go see the King Tut museums and go look at King Akhenaten. Mm-hmm. And you look at that face, and this is circa, say, 1250 BC, right? And I know they like to predate that to the Exodus. That was before that. So this was not the Pharaoh of the Exodus, but it's a very important dragon king in the bloodlines. And that's why they're in the news all of the time, is because they place such importance on this bloodline, and Akhenaten in particular, and Skoda, his daughter. And so he disappears from history, right? But he is one of the, I guess, pure dragon lines that they recognize. That Skoda goes off to Ireland and then becomes descendants go over to Scotland thereafter. But Akhenaten disappears. And his face, if you look at his face there, it is like a snake. I don't know. It's got a protruding chin, high cheekbones, slanted eyes, elongated skull, and it is just not normal. And this is, if we're using 12 to 1300 BC, and the Nephilim are going to be created sometime before 3000 BC, and then after the flood, this is thousands, over 1,000 years, like 1,500 years afterwards, depending on which date you want to use, where they still have a likeness. And they were, I think, some of these giants had a frightening look as they were known in the Bible during the time of conquest, because some of the names that were named, whether it's Anakim, Rephaim, or Zamzumim, they all had names that went back to Hebrew with a meaning to describe these giants. And Anakim, in one of the translations, is a long neck, like a serpent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that's been lost over time, I believe. And certainly as they were, so many of them were driven out of the Middle East over time, except for the kings and the dynasties. Again, they would have intermarried with more humans down the road. So I think that's why those features aren't there. I know there's a mythos out there that they have a changeling quality, and so they still look like serpents underneath, but there's nothing to substantiate that. And you would have to presume that somehow that changeling quality that perhaps the angels did to come into this world and take a form of their choice was passed on to the original Nephilim, which has been passed on down the millennia, which is, I suppose, possible, but it's a big reach for me. So I don't think they look like serpents today.
So you don't think that there's any validity to this idea that George Bush had snake eyes and all that? I mean, I've seen those pictures and I'm just like, I don't know, that's hard to believe.
Yeah, it's hard to know on cameras. I know I've seen some tapes. Well, watch this. This guy's got this black dilating sort of eyes, and then they kind of disappear. And I'm going, well, I suppose if I squint, but no, I'm not thinking that that's the case. But I mean, I don't know for sure either. But it seems like a bit of a reach to me, and I know it's a very strong feeling out there with many, but there's nothing to substantiate that.
Right. Absolutely. Right. So, okay, you started tying together a lot of these different groups, but so what do they want to do? What are they hoping to actually accomplish?
Well, what they're trying to do is there's a secondary reason why they want the end time, other than to have that day with destiny with God and to fight for the rebellion and their freedom. That's what they're trying to do. But if you understand what they talk about in Theosophy or ancient Gnosticism or Eastern religions, or probably best known as the New Age today, is that they always talk about this harmonic convergence, right? Where they're going to vibrate or evolve to a higher level of being. And so how they believe that comes about is they need to collect what they call the seed of the divine, or the spark of the divine. And you hear about this talking about in Illuminati terms, in terms of 1,000 points of light that George Bush talked about, and so did George Jr. a few times. And what that is that spark of the divine. It's the gene of Isis that's been implanted in the descendants. This is not a harmonic convergence for mundane humans. This is a harmonic convergence for the ones they want to take over the earth. And if you believe the number on the Georgia Guidestones, 500 million of them is what they would want. And only mundane humans would be for, I guess, slavery, or if they want to keep them around at all just to serve them. And so what they believe is that to collect this spark of the divine so that it unites, the world has to come together. The world has to come together under one religion and one government. And at that point in time, then it permits the opportunity to vibrate, as they say, or evolve, or move to a higher level of being, translation, godhood. And that's what they're trying to bring about, as well as gain their own realm. And my understanding, and that's what they actually say, is they believe that they can win a battle in justification and through actions where they can live on their own, away from God, where Lucifer, as they like to call him, will be their God, because he's the God of freedom, the God of knowledge, and looks after human beings. And they are the children of light. They are the sons of light. And what people need to understand is that they turn what we believe in inside out and upside down, right? And understand that they believe themselves as the children of light, just as Satan masquerades as an angel of light. Right? And so they believe that they are the good people, and Our God is the evil God, and we are the evil people who do harm to everyone else on the earth, aka they'll bring out examples like the Roman Catholic Inquisitions. They'll bring out examples of what God would do, like destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, which they would look at as cities of light and knowledge and civilizations after the flood, the destruction at Babel, the flood, and on and on and on, or the conquest, the slaughter of the people and the conquest of the promised land. They look at all of those as proof that our God is evil. And so they have a completely inside out, upside down version of things, and they believe they're the good ones.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just checking the chat room there to see if we had any more questions.
Well, that's okay. I just thought I'd let you get back in again, because I get on a roll sometimes, and I just
not at all.
The time. So
I'm loving it. I mean, this is absolutely it's spellbound. You know, just to listen to how these things all come together. And again, you know, I kind of made the same suggestion in my book, Millennium Chronicles, that, you know, Satan really does think that he can win. I don't think that he's just kind of doing a Hail Mary and he's like, well, it's over, so it's not going to happen. I think that he is, you know, maybe so deceived that he thinks that he can pull a fast one somehow. And the way that I think he does it, here just to give people my little perspective. This is my book here, the Millennium Chronicles. The way that I saw, you know, this coming together is that he doesn't have to play by the rules. He doesn't have to tell the truth, all right? And God is bound by that. And so if he can get God to be disproven in just one area, for one false thing to happen, then God is not worthy of being God. And then he would then have a tie, essentially, and he could kind of come to terms. And he's convinced that, you know, mankind is not worth serving, and that, you know, all of us are supposed to be servants to one another. And, you know, we're not, we humans are not worth serving. So,
well, and I think those are really good points. And I think God has given him the latitude to be able to do that, which again shows you how omnipotent God actually is, and not even just to the end time, but he's going to be in prison for 1,000 years, and God's going to let him out again.
Yeah. Right? Isn't that amazing? I know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I tell you, when I was studying about the millennium, I'm like, what in the world? Like, why would anybody listen? But, you know, I think it's that same, you know, whatever you want to call it, in the human heart, that condition that says, you know, if I could do it my own way, it would be a lot better. I'm not going to follow God's instructions. I'm not going to do it God's way. I'm pretty convinced that my way is better. And it comes just really down to being selfish or selfless. You know, I think at the end of the day, those are the two options that we really have. And a lot of people would rather just be selfish, and it can be very subtle, but that's ultimately what we're talking about here, is being selfish.
Absolutely. And ultimately, God is using him to help fulfill the number of the Gentiles, right? And the number of the Israelites, because not only through to the end time, but then again, one presumes in the millennium that, I mean, it's not all just descendants of Israelites in the millennium, that there'll be 1,000 years of opportunity for people to choose God and be part of that greater number. So I think, you know, God always is you know, way ahead on this thing. And I don't know, I just don't get how Satan could think that he has a chance, but he's going to try. There's no doubt about that. And so, but if we move now back into moving forward on setting up the end time, there's a number of organizations, but there's one that was set up in 1968, which is very, very important. And that's called the Club of Rome. And that Club of Rome answers directly to the Rosicrucians as well, although some people will say they answer to the Committee of 300. But either way, they're up there, and I think everything funnels through the Rosicrucians in most of my research. So, and they were set up in 1968 to specifically set up world government, but in a predetermined 10 zones. 10, you can call them economic zones, or you can call them trading blocks, or you can call them spheres of influence, groups of nations, empires. I don't care which word you want to use, but that's what they're been trying to do ever since. And they've created a whole set of policies that came out of the Club of Rome to try and help to cattle herd humans into world government. You know, things like peak oil, things like global warming, things like overpopulation, on and on and on. These are all their doctrines coming out, and they write about that. I'm not making this up. It was interesting, just as a side note, I heard another disparaging thing on global warming today, that the information that they used for the signing of the global warming treaty last year is been manipulated and is more lies than fact again. So it's just an interesting coincidence as I bring that up today. And so when we look at 10, I mean, that's a very important number, not only from what we believe as Christians in prophecy, but what they believe. And again, God is permitting them to do this, right? And they won't get there until the restrainer is removed, but they will get there because it's ordained. And so they take the number 10 out of the antediluvian epoch in Atlantis, whereas I think I probably mentioned in our last show that they had 10 nations in that Atlantean empire that was known as the helm of world government, even though it didn't quite get there, right? And so Francis Bacon recoins this name when he writes his book, which is the inspiration for the founding of the Royal Society that we talked about earlier, called The New Atlantis, where you have this world government with this religion that works in harmony with the sciences, which is no coincidence that it's the Gnostic polytheist global religion behind the sciences that are leading people away from God. That is going to be the one that works in the end time. And they're trying to bring about the new Atlantis. And so that matches up pretty much perfectly, whether or not it happens exactly that way, but it certainly looks like it's shaping up that way. That when we look at Revelation or Daniel, and there's 10 empires of the world government that hand, at the 3.5 point of the last 7 years, hands their government over to Antichrist, that this is exactly what God is permitting them to do, just not on their timetable. They'll bring about the end time on any timetable other than God's, given a choice. But they'll accept the ordained times if they have to. And that's why they're always ready to go with Antichrist. They always have Antichrist being trained and in the loop and initiated to a level of Mensa level, as they like to talk about it, because they never know when that opportunity is going to come along. But what they also know is the attempts in the past to do it through war just never work out. It's just too big of a world. It's too messy. It's too bloody. It takes too much time. This next go around is you have for the end time, you have the universal religion, which they need to get set up, which helps negotiate, and who will partner with that, I believe, will be Antichrist to bring about this world government. But the universal religion comes first, and then comes Antichrist. And then he will destroy that universal religion at the midpoint. But at that point in time, that's where it starts to fuse together. And so Antichrist, he takes over the world government in a coup, relatively easily by the sounds of Daniel and in Revelations, because the 10 kings, they hand their power over to him, and then he gets rid of 3 of them, even though they all hand it over. So it's kind of like almost a bloodless coup, it seems, of some sort, as opposed to trying getting this big army and trying to run armies through every continent of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're working at continually to set up. And it does sort of move forward step by step by step, but not at the pace that they want it to move. And that's why you hear so much not misinformation, but they're just too eager. So that they would talk about, whether or not you're talking about Kissinger or others, that Obama was going to be the one to bring about the New World Order. Well, maybe as his life extends, but certainly not as president. And now there's a lot of talk that Kissinger wants to draft President Trump to bring about the New World Order. We'll see whether that actually happens or not. But they seem to get stymied all of the time. So, and I know I've lost you on screen there, and I don't know whether you're still there, so I'll let you in to see whether or not you're still there.
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay.
And I just wanted to pull this up. This is a great movie put out by Chris Pinto called Secret Mysteries of America's Beginnings, Volume 1, The New Atlantis. So when you were talking about the New Atlantis, I just remember watching this. Chris Pinto did just an awesome job of putting this thing together. And I'd love to get him on the show as well, because he's just another guy who's a wealth of information. But it's astounding when you look at all of these things, how for centuries these have been going on, the patience that this takes to bring about this plan. And something that's really weird, like if you look at the back of the dollar bill, like why in the world do you have that crazy symbol there? That has nothing to do with anything that America is supposed to stand for. It has nothing to do, as far as we can tell, with our Christian heritage, right? But obviously there's something amiss, and it's even there in Latin, right? The conception of the New World Order. It's right there, right? And so it's kind of in our face, but it's hidden. And you start opening up this Pandora's box, and oh my goodness, it starts to flood out. You're like, oh my goodness, put the thing back on. I don't want to know. It's too much. But
they in their belief system, they wanted to set up America right from the discovering of it, and they were I think they were these organizations were helping fund the Columbus trips, and in their mythology they were making trips over here before through the Sinclair family out of Scotland before Columbus came. But Columbus flew the Templar flag on his ship on the Santa Maria. And there's a lot, and they actually believe he was a Freemason inside of their own writings. So there's a connection there. So they think that the thought is that they provided Columbus with the information and helped fund it. It wasn't just a Spanish thing. That's just sort of a rewrite of history, although the Spanish throne was obviously involved. But then they would be, because they'd be the noble bloodlines, right? So the America was set up to be a platform to bring about world government, and as an archetype of what world government should look like if they could get it right. And thirdly, it was going to be a place where they could be away from the reach and the oversight of the Roman Church and the persecution of the Roman Church for their Gnostic religion, which is why religious freedoms were put in, not to protect Christians, but to protect themselves, because there were so many Freemasons that were part of the revolution. And again, notice what I had said earlier about them controlling the military. Most of those were military and politicians that were Freemasons, right? And so when you have the establishment of America for an archetype of the world government, what does that mean? Well, you have independent states working together with one strong separate government, and the ideology was they're going to have free trade between the states, which protectionism and things didn't quite work out exactly the way they wanted. And then secondly, they were going to help raise the United States to being the superpower to bring about the New World Order. And that's been the goal all along. Brazil was supposed to be part of that whole thing, but that just bogged down into corruption, and it never really did hit its stride as the second arm of bringing that about. Just as at the same time, the French Revolution was the same idea. They wanted to put Duke Orleans on the throne, who was Illuminati, to run France as well, as part of this whole shift in that same direction, except Napoleon comes along and usurps the kingship, right? And the whole French Revolution got out of control on them. So that one didn't quite work out. And so when we understand these things, then you understand why there's so much imagery and iconology involved with the United States. And that pyramid on the $1 bill, if you notice that cap is not attached to it. And what that means is that the New World Order is not yet complete. There's still work to
do. It's amazing. We have another question. Let's go ahead and get this. Let's see this. Can he talk about Trudeau and the Sinclair family dynasty who started Scottish Freemasonry?
Yeah, so Pierre Trudeau was prime minister in 1968, member of the Club of Rome. And actually, when I was growing up, they showed a couple clips of them going into the meetings, and then that came to a quick end after that. But they actually said on it, I thought, well, I wonder what the Club of Rome is, because I'm not very old. I'm like 10 years old when I'm seeing this in 1968. And so Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau family is one of the first French families of the French settlement in North America, and goes back obviously to France. But Pierre Trudeau's father marries into the Sinclair family. So again, this intermarriage thing, and in North America they call it pseudo blue bloods. They're never going to be as pure, but they're always trying to increase that level of purity. So this is the Sinclair family that goes back to Scotland. So then Justin Trudeau, who is the prime minister today, and then Pierre Trudeau marries Margaret Sinclair. So you have more injection of blood, which produces Justin Trudeau, who's the prime minister in Canada now. And so you have this power and this bloodline connection again, just as so many presidents take their bloodline back to the Plantagenet, which is the Anjou, which is one of the members that founded the Knights Templar, of course. Which is why I mentioned them just sort of in passing in the beginning, because that's just a whole nother show on itself. And so Pierre, who he's in a little bit of trouble because Justin's in a little bit of trouble right now because he accepted a free trip to go to a Caribbean island to meet with friends of the family. And this is the Aga Khan, one of the richest people in the world, certainly in the top number anyways, and is the leader of the Sufis, which is the third part of Islam, which is the mystical branch, which is the same mystical branch that merged into the Knights Templar at the forming of that organization at the beginning, which was the Assassins, which was the organization of the Templars that was brought back to Europe. And so they're personal friends with the family, and it's that mystical religion again, and how they associate at those levels is just fascinating to watch. So without boring people too much with Canadian politics, that's kind of one of the things I'm watching here in Canada quite closely right now.
That's amazing. So if they could get what if they could, actually accomplish their goal would be to set up a world religion, to have a world, empire, or let's call it, political system. Then part of their goal is to raise up a person. I remember reading in the notes to the Masonic Bible that they believe that a man is going to rise up with what do they say? They're going to rise up with the charm and everything that is needed to lead the world to to basically a new world order. And then, so let's say that they get the new world order. Then what if they were actually get everything they wanted? What would it look like, and what would it accomplish for them?
Would be a utopian 1,000-year reign. So it's a inside out corrupted version of the millennium that Jesus is going to reign over. So everything is like it's like an anti-millennium, or like as an antichrist, or as an anti-pope, or a false prophet. So we're trying to mimic it in a different way, with a different religion and different laws and guidance. And so if you look at Hitler's reign, and he had what was called the Third Reich, and what that was trying to establish a 1,000-year reign. This goes back in time. They've always wanted to do this, and this is the age where they are developing into God in staged levels in the physical world. So their promise is godhood in a world on their own, but in the physical world, and not in the spiritual world as what God promises. And that's all that they can offer. And they do talk maybe possibly, but I've not seen anything definite coming out of their writings on any of the research that I've seen, that they actually can raise that godhood to the spiritual realm, or to heaven. What they do is try and create the demigod idea that the Nephilim had in the original creation. That's what they're really trying to offer.
Okay. So that is basically their end goal, is that if they could become gods, then they've accomplished their goal, and that's pretty much all you can ever want, is to become a god. I mean, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
yeah,
I mean, it seems like it, right?
And as you match in their other ideologies, this does include other beings. This does include other planets as you get into the doctrines of not only the secret societies, but the Gnostic religions. And so this marries with the alien mythos that we are one of many beings fighting against the dark forces in the universe, right? But we need to continue to develop our this is our belief, we need to continue our development into higher states of beings and to gods, because there's several different levels of gods as you get into understanding their sort of doctrines. And so we will sit at this galactic table of rebellious peoples against the dark forces of the universe, which they call God and his angels and anybody who believes in him. A Star Wars analogy, so to speak, only in upside down and inside out.
Exactly.
And what are they doing? They're fighting for their rebellion. What they tend to do in their entertainment and their literature is they tell us what they're going to do, what it's going to look like, because they think that we're too stupid to understand what they're telling us or to understand the language of what they're telling us, because we're just mundane human beings. We're not godlike like they are.
Well, and they're basically right. I mean, the average person is not listening, doesn't care, is just trying to make a living, So,
Yep.
They could tell us everything that they're planning to do, and nobody would be any the wiser or any worse off or care about that at all. So, well, I want to just thank you for coming on again. Everybody, I want you to go and get his book, Genesis 6 Giants. It's a great book. Obviously, you can see that again, we've scratched the surface of what he has in that book. Just so many good things in there. They can go to Genesis6conspiracy.com. Check that out. They can also go to Amazon and other places where books are sold. If you're interested in my little version here, it's not quite as in-depth as his. I take a different slant, just a different discussion about this, as the sort of the genetics of this whole thing. And I get into the conspiracy just a little bit, but really, if you're looking to get something about the conspiracy and tying it all together, I think Gary has just done an awesome job. Just to point out again, my book, The Millennium Chronicles, this I wrote as a novel, and I wanted to take a lot of these things that we're talking about, some of the things I talk about in my book, and put it into a story format. So I'll tell you, the good news that I continue to thank the Lord for is that he is in charge, that it doesn't matter how fancy humanity gets technologically, it doesn't matter how much insider information we get, it doesn't matter how much we evolve to the next level, all of that is just absolutely worthless compared to the one true God. And when you think about how much they're working to try to elongate the life in these bodies and to become gods and become these immortals, and God has already promised us all of that. He has promised to give us a new body. He's promised to let us live in the absolute perfect state that this world could ever be in. Those are all promises. And all we have to do is just receive it by faith. I'm excited about that. It's free. That's right. Jesus already paid the price. You could not ask for a better architect than God himself, on every level. You could not ask for a better genetic engineer. You could not ask for, a better ruler. He is the one who is going to rule the world, who's going to rule the nations. And you know what? If you decide to join that company now, then you'll get to have a part in that. If you continue to rebel and say, I'm not going to do it, I will not have this one rule over us, then you'll get the experience the other side. And what exactly that looks like, I don't know, but I don't really want to go that direction. So I recommend getting on the Jesus bandwagon, because he is going to rule the world. And you know what the great thing about it is? Yes, we know he's going to be ruling with a rod of iron and all that stuff, but his kingdom is based on love. His kingdom is based on giving. His kingdom is based on helping, serving. Satan's kingdom is based on taking. It's based on lording it over others. That's what it is all about. And it really is the competition or the survival of the fittest. That's what Satan's kingdom is all about. But Jesus' kingdom is not that way. Jesus is the fittest, but he is there as the strongest to help the weakest to rise up. And Satan's is just the opposite. So truly, from every angle, Jesus has the better kingdom. And I just want to encourage people, if you're not right with God, get right with him, ask for forgiveness, ask him to forgive you of the lawless deeds you've done, and then trust him and make him your king and follow him. So again, Gary, thank you for coming on. Everyone, check out his book, Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And until next time, stay in the Word.